I love to teach kids about writing because I see in their faces them enjoying writing when they have hated writing before. When I was a teacher in the school system, before I had kids, after I had babies, I homeschooled them all, of course, but before, when I was a teacher, the last 2 years out of the 7 years that I taught, I was hired as a creative writing teacher the whole day, and they actually, in a public school system, believe it or not, they allowed me to create my own curriculum because there were minority students and they had all across the board failed the standardized testing, and they wanted to raise their scores to have federal funding. So they wanted writing the whole day from me and have all the kids come through just for that writing. Well, I raised their scores way, way higher the following year, and I was their only writing teacher. So what I'm telling you today works, and it works because I care about the kids writing with their heart, okay? What I don't like about language arts workbooks is that they are dry and dull. They are not, okay, I'm a certified English teacher, so, and I give them a thumbs down, and there's a reason. It's because professional writers, okay, let's say, here's a professional writer, and here's your kid, let's just say your son, who hates writing, okay? Now, you assign your son something he doesn't like and doesn't know anything about, okay? Assign the professional writer that cha-ching makes tons of money and is awesome at writing in a particular niche, okay? But you assign them that same boring topic over here, okay? They will both throw a fit. I know because I'm a writer too, okay? I write every day for like the past 3 years. I've written every day. I'm a blogger and stuff too. I love writing, okay? I'm telling you, if someone assigned me to write something boring that I know nothing about, I would sit there with a blank screen, just like your kid sits there in front of a blank sheet of paper, wanting to scream, okay? And this is a professional writer who knows how to write. What I'm saying is that you, as homeschoolers, have the unique ability to be able to give to your kids writing assignments that are interesting, fun, something they know about, something they love, so that their writing can improve and be magnificent. And then by the time that they're in high school, then you can throw in other things like essay writing and all that, but their writing will be juicy by then, you know? It'll be exciting, you know? And so definitely, this is important. I love it. I really believe strongly that people should write from their heart and from what they know and be given unique assignments based on their personality, okay? And I'm telling you, as a teacher, I couldn't really do that individually with a classroom full of like 40 kids or whatever, not really. But I did, you know, hype things up by dressing in costumes and things like that, so everybody was excited about what I was saying. So you can do that too, and I have products for that on my table. Anyways, one of the things that I did when I was a teacher, those last 2 years that I was teaching as a creative writing teacher, I hosted a mystery and I got on the front page of the newspaper. I just want you to know that, you know, like I dressed up as Scarlet, and then Colonel Mustard was the history teacher across the hall from me, and like that. And I made up our whole, you know, mystery, and I dug a hole and actually put a bag of treasure into the hole and kind of made it seem like there wasn't anything there. And then what I did was, for the chalk outline of, I put my husband on the ground like this and taped around him. I mean, you could do that too. At home, you know, tape with the masking tape or whatever, and then, you know, whodunit. And it's just so exciting when you actually have, you know, when you splash into that topic. Okay, so today I would like to tell you 5 things to remember when teaching your reluctant writer when you're homeschooling. The first thing is to experience your topic if possible. Your kid has to have knowledge of the topic that he's talking about. He can't possibly, and I'm going to say he, but of course it's she as well. They need to know what they're talking about, because otherwise they have nothing to say. They have no details. They have no nothing fresh to bring to the table. Your child can write something new and fresh and interesting and exciting that an adult would want to read. Don't you want your kids to write that way? You just want them to crank out boring boring, stupid papers, no. You don't want that, right? You don't want to just jump through hoops of some, dry assignment. No. You want them to learn to write with their heart so that they know how to communicate. Knowing how to communicate is what matters in writing. And let me tell you, because I've scored so many papers, I know the things that I look for and something that sparks interest. And I'll tell you some of these things here. But so experience your topic. For example, let's say your son or daughter loves trains, and what you can do is, of course, read books about trains so they can gain knowledge about trains, okay? So you just go to your library and read about trains, look at pictures about trains, watch videos about trains. Now, even better than that, go on a train ride. Why? Because you hear the clickety-clack and the experience of being there. When you bring that to your writing, it comes alive and you feel like you're there. It draws the audience into your story. You see, you can get that through videos as well. But what I'm saying is plunge into it as much as you can, an area of interest of your child. And your child will voraciously absorb all that information because they love it, and they'll be writing a lot more than they would have over some, I got assigned one time in college, I got assigned something that said, write something about fads. Okay, I grew up in Guatemala as a missionary kid, and we didn't have fads. So I knew zero about fads. I'm just like, oh, great. And they didn't give you a thing to choose from, okay? So what I did in that situation is you can, see, once you're a good writer, you can get a topic and hit it from an angle you care about, okay? And I can say something like, fads don't exist in other countries, and this is why. These are the reasons why fads don't exist and why they don't matter. And then I write elaborately about why, or I could write about why assignments that are given, I've been a scorer of tests too, and if you have spunk in your writing and prove that you can write, that's the whole point of that paper. So yes, you can move it around. Another thing that I was assigned in college, and I'm telling you about college because this is what you're doing. You're preparing your kids, and some of you in here probably have high schoolers. You're preparing them for college, okay? They need to be able to write about anything. Later, right now they should write about what they love, because they need to deepen and have more experience with writing in order to be good at it, okay? But I was assigned your family tradition, and like everybody was writing about Thanksgiving or something, and I was just like, oh, that's so boring, can't stand it. And that's similar to what your kids might feel about what you assign. And so I thought, furlough, my family's tradition, okay? Because for me, my family's tradition was furlough, going up and visiting the churches that were supporting us. And I wrote that, and the professor was like handing it around to all the other professors that got all this hoopla, and it ended up being the first chapter of a book that I published last year, growing up as a missionary kid. So you never know when your papers, your kids could be published authors. They really can. Anybody can be a good writer. Writing is an expression of the soul, and everyone has a beautiful soul, So, and everyone is unique, so everyone has something new and fresh to bring to the table. You just have to enjoy what you're doing. Okay, now, an artificial delight in something. Let's say you want your kid to write about something. They have no desire for it. It's boring to them. Splash them into it. Give them some knowledge and excitement about it. For example, Renaissance Fair. A lot of different cities have a Renaissance Fair. So if you want them to write about medieval times, jousting, anything like that, if they experience actual jousting, if they watch it, and they make it look pretty real. This is one that's done near Spokane each summer. And so you can do that. So you can create artificial hoopla to get your kid excited and interested in writing about something they know nothing about, but you want them to branch out because it's what you're teaching, like in history. And actually, this is one reason I like to do unit studies, is because if you can combine your writing with what you're studying, if you've splashed into the subject, you've already created excitement and stuff with, hands-on things that you're doing with your kids in that time period, like ancient Egypt or whatever, and you have them writing about ancient Egypt. They're excited about the mummy that they just saw, but whatever, you know. So artificial plunging into experience. You can also get someone who is an expert at something to get a waterfall of their excitement and expertise onto your kid. Okay, actually what I did, my kids enjoyed birds, okay? I did not care about birds. Birds were boring to me, and I was like, oh, whatever for birds. But I knew that I wanted to teach my kids birds because that was their excitement. So what I did is I signed up for a night class for me. And it was only 3 nights, I think, not for credit or anything, you know, those things that are taught by people who love it, okay? And so I went there, I listened to everything he had to say, and I loved birds after that class because he was so excited about it. And it's catchy. When they're all excited, you know, then you get all excited about it. So I knew, and plus, additional knowledge also helps you to enjoy something more. If you have no knowledge about something, it's boring and tedious and you don't want to have anything to do with it, like politics or something that you might block out of your mind because you don't want anything to do with it. So I had excitement of birds. I figured out all the markings of the birds, and when their beak opens, a different song comes out of each bird, and it was just magnificent. And he showed us, he took us on a field trip on the 3rd day or something, and we saw all the different birds, and I mean, I don't know how many birds we saw that day. He knew exactly where to find all these different birds, and we like saw actual wild hoot owls swiveling their heads around and stuff. And oh my goodness, I took my kids back to those places and showed them all those birds, and they were so excited, and they colored the different birds, and we had a great bird unit study, but it was because, and they were able to write about birdseeing. But I'm telling you, if someone is excited about something, let's say you have a grandparent that's excited about horses, and your kid's excited about horses, you don't care about horses whatsoever, get them together, and then the excitement will build their understanding of whatever they're good at, whatever the grandparent is good at. Okay, so people can be used for experience to gain knowledge or vicarious experience. It doesn't necessarily have to be real experience, but as you saw, when we went to see actual birds, they had more understanding, and so they could say how they felt when they saw the osprey swoosh down and grab a fish out of the lake, which we saw. And so that was, you know, really neat. Okay, and then another thing that you can do, obviously there are some things that you can't experience. You, for example, don't want to be murdered to write a mystery, right? But you could go to a police station, you could get experience in things that do help you to write something that you are wanting to write. And so this was just fingerprinting, one of the things we did for my How to Write a Mystery Story set of DVDs that the kids always enjoyed. Okay, so that's number 1 is experience your topic. Oh yes, one more thing I want to say about that is that, okay, this is gardening. Let's say that I'm writing for a magazine about gardening and I've never done any gardening. Is it going to be a good article? No. Is it going to be helpful to people? No. Okay. So really, to experience it is better. It's like reading about driving. Can you drive? No, you've got to drive. So really try to experience it. And experiences actually mature your kids, give them more to think about, expand their imagination. Experiences are worth it, you know, to build up who your kid is as well. All right. So number 2, break it up into installments. Don't write the entire page or the whole writing assignment in one day. Yes, when they're in high school, they should be able to write like a 5-paragraph essay in about 1 hour. However, that shouldn't be their first 5-paragraph essay. Okay, I taught 5-paragraph essays in the school system. Okay, so we did 5 days to do, I'll say, a persuasive essay, okay? So the first day what we did was we made a list of all the reasons why someone should do what we want them to do, because this is a persuasive essay, right? So let's say the kid, the teenager wants their parents to give them a car. Okay, so that's and then all the reasons why. Now, our 5-paragraph essay needs to have 3 reasons. Why do I not stop at 3 reasons? Because the more reasons you have, the more you take time to brainstorm. If you take that whole hour to come up with all of those good reasons, then you circle the best 3. Those are much higher quality than what you would get if you just charged into it to write it all really fast. Now, if you have a time test, this is after you've done it lots of times to practice, you can do it in an hour, and you can just come up with the 3 best ones you can come up with at the time. But that's not what you do if you really are writing something good, or you want to actually persuade someone to do something. Or, you know, in the schools when I was teaching it, I had 5 different days before they turned in their assignment on that Friday. So they didn't write it all in one day. So that's 5 whole class periods, 5 whole hours that we spent on that 5-paragraph essay. Okay, so that was the first day, and I do that actually with blogging, with my humorous top 10s, like, you know, you're the mother of boys when. And I wrote a lot of different ones, and I threw it on the back burner because I wanted to come up with more. And then as I lived life the next few months, then I came up with better ones, and then I crossed off ones that weren't as good, and then I put the top 10 in there. Or like, you know, you're getting old when. And that one got like 12 Facebook likes. Anyway, so what I'm saying is it can be really good if you brainstorm way more and then cross off the other ones. And that's important in pre-writing. All of your kids' writing assignments, the more pre-writing, the deeper and richer and more interesting your story, because if you or your essay, because that's where all the fresh ideas come from that are not trapped down. Because once you trap it down to the 3, then you're expanding on those 3 and you're working really hard on those ideas. You know what I'm saying? So you don't want to trap yourself into something that's lesser, you know? And so we did each day. That second day, we worked on the introductory paragraph. That first sentence had to grab attention. And so we tried it really hard. I mean, professional writers will sometimes spend up to an hour coming up with that first sentence, believe it or not. This is professional writers, so you're comparing yourself against professional writers. That's ridiculous, but for a good paper, you need to have that first sentence draw you in. And then you have your 3 biggest or most important things, and that's in your first paragraph. So that's all that we did that second hour, okay? Then the third day was the hardest day because you did the 3 middle paragraphs that you describe in there, and then in the 4th day you finish that off and also do the conclusion, and then you cross off things and add more, you know, and do more revision and editing, and then you have a polished draft by the 5th day. So that's what I'm saying. You could break it up into installments. You have a way better paper. And I mean, you guys, you're not required to do 100 assignments this year. No. Okay? If you have 5 really deep, rich, really outstanding papers in your portfolio, instead of, well, or 10 or whatever, you know, that's way better. And, you know, kids from the school system throw away all those papers because they're worthless. And if you put your heart into it, you want to keep them forever. I know. The things that I put my heart into when I was a kid, I still have them. My grandmother said I was going to be a famous author one day. I keep everything I wrote, and it's kind of crazy how sometimes that might happen. So when I'm talking about installments, writing a story is also in installments. This is like from How to Write a Mystery Story. It's a set of DVDs, but anyway, the first day, I'm telling you, the first day you do the setting and action. You always want to draw people in with action. Something's happening like a problem that you want resolved, and so it sucks you into the story so you can't stop reading, okay? And the setting has to be there too, because where are you? So it's the dark and stormy night, and you have the dark figure. How's the dark figure going to get into the mansion? Are they going to tunnel under the ground? Are they going to crawl up the drain pipe? Are they going to, go through the window up above? And so you brainstorm all these things, and you do one piece of it at a time. And this is why it was successful in the schools with kids who failed overall, because I guide them step by step, one installment at a time. And so they're able to be successful. And that's especially if they're reluctant. To start off, you need to do it one installment at a time. And then you have the clues and then the suspects, and I had them do a ring of cards to describe each suspect and each character, and then writing them into the story and how to do all that. So that's similar to what I just said about the 5-paragraph essay. You do it in installments, it ends up deeper, richer, better at the end. They're proud of what they did, they love it, they'll probably keep it for the rest of their lives instead of rolling their eyes and saying, oh, I can't stand this. No, they're into the story, and they, oh, I want to do a surprise ending for this one. I'm going to make it seem like it's this suspect, and then all of a sudden, boom, it's this guy over here, and I give you a clue way back here, which you didn't know because I just kind of wrote it, snuck it in there. So, and actually, all the plots of every story that you do, you could do it in installments. When I'm talking about installments, you have the introduction and rising action. I always like to have action at the beginning, especially when kids are writing. There are some famous novels that are classics that don't have action at the beginning. It's harder to get into it. But it's a classic for a reason or whatever. So you can have just the setting at the beginning, and so like a western town or something, so you could describe the setting. The rising action is some problem happens, and that problem needs to be resolved, and then something worse happens, or something else happens, something gets bungled up, and oh no, and then the climax is the most exciting part of the story. Okay, so that's the most important part of the story. And then the falling action and resolution. If you're writing a pretty short story, the falling action and resolution should probably take only 1 paragraph even, because you want to resolve it, tell them, did this guy get put in jail, did they get caught? You need all that to wrap things up. But once that exciting thing is at that conclusion, and I know some famous authors who actually stop at the climax, and it's like there's maybe one, they write the resolution almost before the climax or in the middle of it, but you have to have the formula right before you tamper with it and then, do your own thing. Because there has to be a sense of satisfaction at the end of your story. Otherwise you're like, well, what about this? And you're confused, So, and then you can have, another thing about installments is if you sleep on it, the next day you'll come up with more ideas, and you might take it in a completely different direction. Okay, like with the mystery story, one of my kids turned around and had it be a completely different character who did it at the end, and so crossed off a bunch of what he did because he wanted to move in this other direction. See? So sleeping on it, separating it to different days and installments or different days means you sleep and you wake up and you have fresh ideas that next day. So the paper's better because of that. Okay, number 3. Pull the story out of a child orally. Now, especially if they are reluctant or they are young or they have problems forming their letters, or it takes them forever to form their letters. And let me tell you, there are some adults who take forever to write. They're meticulous. Their writing is like calligraphy. It's gorgeous, okay? But it takes them forever to write. If someone takes forever to write something, or they hate writing and don't want to put pen to the paper and they're screaming, and I've heard lots of mothers say their kids scream over writing, okay? So if that is your kid, the first step that I say, and so your son hates to write, the first thing I say, make sure that you pull the story out of your child first and do it in a place that is completely disconnected from where you normally teach writing. So you could take them to a restaurant or something and have like an ice cream or something, and just casually, like, first off, you could figure out what they like to write about. You know, what kinds of things are you interested in or whatever, and then have them pull all the information out of them about that, and then suddenly they have an informative paper right there that they could write, you know what I'm saying? Or like with me, when my son was still my oldest son was you know, it took him forever to write, you know, to form letters and stuff. Then I pulled out a story from him that he was making up about a robot in a mine with a runaway car, and it was so interesting and exciting, he just made it up. But I kept saying, okay, well, what happens next? And then I just pulled it out of him. I didn't write it down, I didn't record it or anything, and I have a poor memory sometimes. But I didn't worry about that, because once the kid said it, the kid has a nice, empty, fresh brain, you know. They remember stuff more than your, you know, than you do. And this is the other trick, is, okay, because I've pulled stories out of kids, and then I dictate it back to them when like the next, okay, after I get the whole story out, then if you go home that day or something and write 1 or 2 sentences, if they're teenagers, I would have them write a paragraph only if they despise writing, you know, and I would work with them. And by the way, this is like coaching. I mean, you are the teacher of your kid, and writing is a skill. It's kind of like math. It's a skill. Like, they need you sometimes, you know, to be able to get unstuck. And to be a sounding board, even for professional writers, okay, you sometimes, like, you can't quite explain it. Sometimes, like, you know, I was thinking about predestination and reading St. Augustine. This is just a week ago. And I'm trying to conceptualize it in my mind because I want to write an article about it for the Homeschool channel. So I was talking to my husband about it, and when I'm talking and then he clarifies something, oh, yes, okay. See, I mean, professional writers need a sounding board to articulate what they put into words, what is their idea. And then the other person adds their ideas, and you go, oh yes, I agree with that, or no, I don't agree with that whatsoever because of this, this, and this, and it crystallizes your opinion, you know what I'm saying? And then you can write a much better paper because you just heard whatever was going to be counteracted or whatever, you know, especially for like debates and things, that can really be good. Or papers about like, you know, anti-abortion, those kinds of things that a lot of teenagers have to write when they're in high school in order to, you know, take a stand on something that they believe in. Anyways, so this is also true for kids. Okay, their story before it's, okay, let's say they're sitting there with a blank paper and they need to write a story, well, you know, okay, so now take them to somewhere like in your backyard or something like that, pull the story out of them. Now the story is crystallized in language, okay? It's not captured on paper yet, but it exists, you know what I'm saying? So it's real now. And now when they start writing, they have the story. So when they see the paper, okay, you just got to get them started, okay? So if they're like really young, like 6, or reluctant writer, teenager even, I would dictate the first sentence based on what they said or what I remember them saying. And then my kid said, no, that's not how I want to start it. I want to say this. There, I got their first sentence out of them because they were correcting me, you know, and it triggered the real sentence that they create. And so then I dictated that sentence back to them as they formed their letters, and that was their writing. Now, if you do, like at age 6, you could do 1 or 2 sentences if it takes them forever. The next day, 2 more sentences. The next day, 2 more sentences. Okay, by the end of like 2 weeks or something, they have the front and the back, and it's all their handwriting. It's all their creation, their story, and it's good. And now, I mean, oh, that gives me chills. I just felt chills just now in a happy way. Like, Your kid knows that their writing is good, and they know that that's them, that they did it, you know? That's their words, that's their story. And so that creates confidence that then helps them to write better, okay, in general. Okay, and also, you could do it in a dark room with covers on them, and especially at bedtime. See, we're homeschoolers. We could do this any time of day. So, and actually, this is actually better because then it's like when you study for a test and then you go to sleep, the next day you remember a whole lot more because somehow you're studying in the middle of the night. Okay, if you get their story out of them, like right before they go to sleep, you know, they might come up with, you know, thinking about that story while they sleep. So that's cool too. And so you don't do any writing, like you're putting them to bed, and you know how they want to stay up later. So of course, you can pull a story out of them then. That's a reward. Woohoo! Tell their story, pull it all out. Okay, good night. Shut the door. And the next day, they have a wonderful story that they can write. See? Oh, so much easier for you. They're writing with their heart, and it's fabulous. I know, I'm taking all these pictures of my kids sleeping. I need another picture of you sleeping. Come, somebody else, to get my slideshow. Okay, so number 1 was experience your topic. Number 2 was break it up into installments. Number 3, pull the story out of your child orally. And number 4, let your child's personality shine through the story. And now out of the 5 points that I'm saying today, number 4 I think is the most important because their personality, if they're writing with their heart, they will love what they do. They will love their writing. Okay, let me give you one example. One example is a Wild West story. Okay, I had a son who was 8 years old at the time, and I wanted him to describe his hero. Okay, and so he's like, oh, I can't stand description, okay? Because he thinks description is a girly thing, you know, with, you know, brown hair, cut short, and oh, you know, he can't stand it, okay? So I said, hey, look, okay, now this is my son who loves humor. He's goofy. He likes to joke around, okay? He also likes action. He's always moving, okay? So knowing he likes humor and action, I said, you can write humor and action into your description of this cowboy. And so, and actually because the guy got up in the middle of the night to get dressed, he could describe putting on the cowboy hat, saying there's action, banging over the lamp and everything. And my kid was just like, oh, this is so good. Ah, and he didn't want to stop, okay, because it was so funny, all this humor of knocking things over and slipping on a banana peel or whatever ridiculous thing. You know what I'm saying? But that there is an audience for that kind of humor, for that kind of writing. Believe it or not, there is. And let them have fun. There's other times that they're going to write about different things, okay? But let them experience, like, okay, there's some men, newspaper columnists, that only write humor. They can't write anything worth squat except for humor, and cha-ching, they're making tons of money because they're really good at writing humor, okay? So don't discount your kid and think, oh, because it has humor, it's not, you know, let's flush it down the toilet. No. Okay? Humor is valuable. Like who they are is valuable. So pull out who they are and let that be, you know, the papers that they write, because that is what they'll be writing. I mean, even in college, the papers that you write are related to what you're interested in general. Like, you know, you take classes that you're, you know, interested in. And so anyway, so that's one thing. Now, there are some kids who are very talkative. So you might want to write either a script, puppet show, something you could act out or whatever, because it has all dialogue. You see what I'm saying? Scripts are valuable. There are script writers that only write scripts. Okay? Now, scripts are, you know what you do, like for example, you capitalize all the letters of the the character, you put a colon, and then put the words that they say. And then you do that, and then parentheses, you put any stage directions. Now, this particular puppet show was done as a spoof to Journey to the Center of the Earth, which we read when we were studying rocks and minerals. So we did Journey to the Center of the Earth. It has some evolution in it, but, you know, classics, I enjoy teaching the classics no matter what. And so my kid wrote it, and it was funny. Each of the characters, like it could be an animal or something. It doesn't have to be the exact character in the story. And so each of the scenes was a different aspect of that book. And like, for example, there was a pickaxe where they were trying to get water, and suddenly water started squirting out of the wall in the book. And so I let him get a squirt gun and squirt water at the audience. Isn't that cool? And then we also shut off all the lights and had a flashlight in the cave when they fell into the cave. And so the puppets had a flashlight, you know, flashing around. Okay, so if they're doing a performance, and you can even film it, you know, and do all kinds of stuff. I know from my, I have 10 Dread Pirate Susan YouTube videos that are free. They are, each one is a separate episode of where I say what I said at the beginning. Arg, I'm Dread Pirate Susan Evans. Anyway, and then I give a writing assignment that's 1 page long. And I like the second one, I filmed riding on roller coasters, okay? And the assignment was write a 1-page paper on a theme park. Describe your theme park and what each of the different rides would be, you know? And so, and if you don't know about rides, well, come with me. And then that's when we write on all the things and everything. So anyways, those are free, you know, writing assignments that could get your kid excited. There's 10 of them. But anyway, so it's kind of similar to this. So there's some kids that are very philosophical and deep, and they want to have a deep, poignant point to everything they write, otherwise they think it's trash. And so work to that, you know, help them figure out what a poignant thing would be in whatever he's writing or she is writing. Okay, so figure out what their personality is. I mean, you live with these kids, so you know them, and so you can do that. So make sure that their personality shines through the story. And then number 5, get distance from it. Okay, this is the number one thing to doing revisions without tears. Throw the paper down, walk away, ideally a month, and then come back to it, because you know what? If you say bad things about their paper right after they've written it, oh no, I'm a yucky person, you know, okay? That's how they feel. You've criticized their soul, because what they wrote is them. So you're criticizing them, okay? Now, if you throw it down, walk away, and this is harder to do. Back when I was a teacher, you couldn't really do that. You have to finish what you're doing to start the next thing. Not as a homeschool parent. We have freedom, you know? So do it like the best way, which is disconnecting your heart and emotions from it, because if you wrote something a month ago, you no longer care so much about it, and so you can see it from a disconnected point of view. And actually, real writers do that as well. When I wrote my book, growing up as a missionary kid, okay, I did more revision on it, by the way. It took me longer to revise my book than it did to write it in the first place. So make sure you give your kid plenty of time to revise if you actually expect it to be really good. Cross things out and stuff, and spend time thinking about how to make it better. But anyway, so what you would do is not look at the book for like a month or something, and then come back to it, and I saw tons of things that I was blind to when I was writing it, because that's how I saw it, and I was reading it so much that I was so familiar with it that, you know, you have to back up from it. That's why you need editors. That's why you need other people to read it to see what you, but you can be your own editor if you, I mean, for your kids, they can be their own editors if they see something that they've written before, to revise it and polish it. And I've always thought that the best way to do that as a homeschool parent, and I couldn't do this in the school system unless I saw across the board what some of their weaknesses were in general, and I addressed those. But really, one-on-one with your kid is the absolute ultimate, the best. Okay, so let's say your kid turns in something to you like your 10-page mystery story. Then you throw it to the side for like a month. Actually, you don't let them see it for a month. But what you do as a homeschool mom, you read it and you see the weaknesses. Okay, let's say there's a lot of extraneous information, like she just wrote and repeated herself, and you want to cross off like a lot of her stuff. Okay, so this is a language arts thing. What I did was I went to the white erase board at my house and I could write, I invent some paragraph that has lots of extraneous information, and then I say, here, you smash out my words, make it as short as you can. And they love it because I can smash out mom's words. Okay, and then they try to think of the shortest way to say it. If you do that a lot of different times, and I mean like, you know, a frog doing something funny, like just make up whatever, who cares? In fact, the more absurd, the happier it is for them to play with it and cross things off and stuff, you know? And so they get practice in condensing things down and crossing off extraneous information. So a month later when they see their paper, they go, oh, I said this too many times, I cross it off, you see? So they see you're opening their eyes and strengthening them in their exact weakness that they're weak in, and they're strong in it by the time they're looking at their paper. Spelling words, pull out all the things that they misspelled and quiz them on those spelling words. Well, when they see that a month later, they'll see all the words they misspelled because they now know those spelling words, okay? Let's say if all they said was said, if they're in high school, they could write 100 words instead of said for the assignment for that day for writing. And that's it. That's the only thing. You don't have to write anything else. Just, what are alternate words for said? Like whispered or gruff voice or raspy, dying gasp. I don't know. Think of all the different ways you can say said, screamed, all of those words. If it's elementary, maybe 25 words they could come up with instead of said. Okay, so then they go back to the paper and said, oh my goodness, that's so boring. I want to have this, whatever, And so, and if you tell them that you want them to work on revising this, like you set a certain amount of time, like you want them to revise it for 30 minutes, and that they're going to be revising it for a certain amount of time in total, they don't feel like they have to get it all done, like, cram it in, Professional writers will relax while reviewing something, and they'll go, okay, I want this to be really good, And actually, someone asked me, last time I did this workshop, someone asked me, what about structure? Because I haven't talked about structure in this session. And really, as a person is writing, you like for example, when I'm writing something and there's like a really good poignant point, I want that to be the last paragraph. So I copy and paste it onto the bottom, and then I make the whole article lead to that. You know what I'm saying? So things come up that make you rearrange things, but it's better to know where you're going before you start. Like in the 5-paragraph persuasive essay, you need to know what your outline before you begin it. Otherwise, that would be crazy. But if you're like, a writer writing about, and your kids should have leeway. They should have journals where they're allowed to write about things and not be graded on their writing, Not everything that they write should be polished. And I mentioned this last year in my journaling class, and I have that on DVD because I recorded it. And that is how to use journals, and it causes your kids to write more. And then in their journals, I show how you don't have to, well, I mean, you could read it, but don't grade it or mark it up or anything, because that is just a draft, and then they can choose between all those to polish and revise later. And it's actually, if it's something that they wrote, a few weeks before or a month before, and they wanted to revise something about, like, they woke up and they're 2 inches tall, describe your day, and they really love that one that they wrote last month. Can we polish that one off? So let's learn revision with this fun thing, you know? And so then they cross things off and add more sensory detail or whatever to it. And okay, so like these books, gain distance from it. The reason, look, that's their paper. They can't reach it. I'm like, how do I picture that? Anyways, so let me see. Are there any questions about, there's a whole ton more that I could say. Let me take questions first, and then I can add more to how to help reluctant writers. Yeah.
How do you address when a child has so much ownership in a paper and it's very, very crude and underdeveloped, and so they need to kind of do some refinement, but that emotional bond is so just time, like you mentioned, the month?
Yes.
Give them a chance to detach?
It really does give them the chance to detach. They're not, okay, I'm emotionally involved with what I write today or yesterday or the day before. Sometimes I'm writing something and then I throw it on the back burner for like a month, and I come back to it and I go, oh, that's what was wrong with it. I can't even see my own thing. Kids, definitely, the time thing is the number one thing. That does resolve that issue. The other thing is that you could, okay, let's say you could write something that you're inventing that needs more explanation. Well, how can we describe this frog? Because all you said was, you know, it jumped from this to that and ate the fly. Well, what did it look like when they ate the, you know, when it ate the fly? So then your kid can get that marker and say, the long sticky tongue lashed out and swatted the fly, splat with its saliva as it pulled it back in, you know. And then you can give examples like, you know, so yeah, that kind of thing. So yeah, so make a special lesson like I was saying with the other examples. So any weakness, you can invent your own thing to rectify that weakness. See, that's the ideal. I mean, who wouldn't want that? I mean, I would have loved that having grown up, you know, to have my weaknesses strengthened specifically, which is something you could do. As a homeschooler. Yeah, you have a question? No? Okay, are there any other questions about homeschooling reluctant writers? No more. Okay. Well, let's see here. Some of the stuff that I didn't say. Look at their eyes and see what sparks their interest. Okay, someone asked me, how do you know what your kid is interested in? How do you know what to assign them? And you look at their eyes, look at what, like the books that they pull off the shelf and what interests them, what do they talk about? Even teenagers, what do they talk about, what interests them? You know, they could write about cell phones, they could write about something like that, or they could use some of that in a story, okay? So look at what sparks their interest already, okay? So that was how I answered that question. Let's see. Sorry, there's a lot in here. Okay. Yes, experiencing your topic was that first one that is vital. You need to have knowledge of what you're doing in order to enjoy writing. You can't enjoy it if you don't know anything about it. It's frustrating, and you know, you need to break it up into installments. Don't write it all in one day unless you're already experienced, or if you're doing a journal entry. Doing a journal entry, you can do that in one day because it's just, those are journal starters to help develop fluency. See, that's another thing about reluctant writers. You need to get them to write more so that they're forming their letters faster and stuff like that, which is why I believe strongly in journaling for that. And so then the greater fluency they have in expressing themselves in written language, the stronger the writer you have as well. So that's another thing that you could use. And then pulling the story out of your child orally, especially if they're young or they have trouble forming their letters or they despise it, and then dictating it back to them. I had someone say, I have a bad memory and so does my son. Can we record it? And I said, that's fine if he would like you to record it. Sometimes that makes him nervous. And so I said, record it without them knowing. No, that would be terrible, huh? But I mean, he would have it then. You could probably only pull it off once. No, no, I wouldn't do that. I would have them, you know, decide to record it or something, or else record, and then you pull it out of them. I don't know. I think that they do remember more than you do, and whatever you remember, like I said, you just say some nebulous thing. No, this is what I wanted. They know, because they just have it crystallized in the air, you know, when they have spoken it forth. So that is their story already. Their story is already formed, by the way. Once you pull it out of them, the story is already formed. Or the description that they just said, it's all out now. All you have to do is write it. So much easier, so much easier. Then 4, let your child's personality shine through the story. Let them be who they are. If they want to be a character, a certain character, and I know some girls like to write from a certain character's point of view, and so they could write like a series of a certain character. Or let's say your kid loves dogs. They can write from the point of view of a dog and then do lots of different episodes from the point of view of that dog. You don't have to be confined to a writing assignment that's a one-day writing assignment. Take off and make it individual for your kid, you know, what they enjoy, what they love. And then number 5, get distance from it. Try to set it aside and not look at it for at least a week. I prefer a month, so they don't care by that time. And then they can butcher their own stuff because they're like, oh, okay, it's not, you know, they're not so attached. And especially if you're teaching specifically to their weaknesses, it'll open their eyes. If you do nothing between the time they write it and the time they revise it, you haven't given them the skill to revise their own work, which is why I recommend teaching them those things, you know, because otherwise they won't see that they said over and over, you know. And I address a lot of this in my time travel, writing historical fiction. It's not released yet, but it's going to be an 8 DVD set. And what I'm doing is I go to each time period, and I taught this to 8 homeschool kids in my home. I emptied out my living room and had props, costume, scenery for each time period, and had a time machine. And then what I did was afterwards, I have, like the next day after they turned in their assignment, I was filmed, I read the story, and then I said what the strengths of it were and then the weaknesses. And so then at home the kids could see, oh, I have those weaknesses in my paper. I need to describe more of whatever, you know. And so, or like I said, during the Roman time period, I said, if you mention Christ, you don't have to mention Christ, but if you mention Christ, it should be a poignant moment. That's, you know, because you have the potential to do something poignant, like, oh, wow, that, you can create that feeling in that time period by that, you know what I'm saying? If you don't want that, then don't have that in there at all, or have him walking past or something and go to the Colosseum instead, you know? And so they could choose from all these different things. And then, you know, another thing, like in revising, okay, and this was major. One of my kids in my class, they were in a labyrinth, and they didn't know how to get out of the labyrinth, and they hated their story. And I said, well, just crumple it up, throw it in the trash. Choose a different thing to do, like go to the theater, because this is ancient Greece. And so I said, you do this too. Tell your kids, if they start something that they know about, you know, and everything, and they thought they would be excited about it, and they've written 2 sentences, and they're stuck, okay, you don't have to force them to finish it. Crumple it up, do a fresh new idea, you know what I'm saying? Because then his next one was way better. He jumped out of the Trojan horse and there's fire everywhere. And that was way better than being lost in the labyrinth. But, you know, and I mean, I was trying to get him to say, okay, well, do the walls smell musty? And, you know, were you scared? And he's just like, I don't even want to be here, he said. I said, let's go somewhere else, you know? And so you can do that with your kids. Get them excited. And if there's a dead end, professional writers crumple it, throw it in the trash, you know. We have tons of dead ends, okay? And that's professional writers. So don't expect your kids to finish every single assignment necessarily if they're stuck and they hate it. Have them choose something exciting, or take them somewhere and have them write about the experience, you know, that they go to. So, okay, well, any last questions? There's only 5 minutes left. Any other questions? I can answer them, I really can. I have so much more to say, but that's like, got only an hour and 5 minutes left.
What would you do with a boy who, the only topic he seems remotely interested in is Star Wars? And
Okay.
It's like, okay, could we pick something else?
See, that's okay. I would go into experiencing a different topic. So think of, well, there are some other things that might interest him. Okay, here's Star Wars for him, and then here's a few other things. Choose one of these, and then create an experience, and then suddenly his eyes are lit up about that. Then he can write about that. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But do let him write about his passion as well. I would definitely let a kid write about their passion, even if that's the main thing they did, even up to 50% of what they wrote even. I mean, if it was my kid, I do want them to branch out and do other types of things too. But I would say give them so much freedom that up to 50% of what they write could be just their thing, because that might be what their future career is. You never know. I know one of my students, when I was teaching in London, I taught in London, England for 2 years. I was a drama director too, as you can tell. I was an English teacher. And one of my students there loved to write about dragons and stuff like that. And anyway, people like that end up writing a fantasy about dragons and all these different series, and then they're famous writers. So if I hadn't let her write, you know, many different times about that, that would have stifled the direction that God was taking her in. You know what I'm saying? So a passion, I think, should be encouraged and, you know, and branch out as well. But I think it should at least get equal because they love it. And if they're writing about what they enjoy and love, their main thing that they love, then they will gain more expertise in writing, which is what you're wanting. And so yeah, that matters. Any last questions? Okay, well, thank you very much for coming to my show. This is Dread Pirate, Susan Evans.